is a real thing. And so we have to figure out how to recover from all this, recover from all of it.
Tonight, a lifetime of achievement. Susan Aglukark is recognized with the Juno Award for humanitarian service.
We're going to own a major piece of infrastructure that impacts every citizen in the Yukon.
Plus, 13 First Nations in the Yukon will be on the leading edge of faster internet services.
The Ammonites have been used in the Blackfoot culture and spirituality for over 1,000 years.
And this mineral is now the official gemstone of a prairie province. Good evening. Welcome to APTN National News. I'm Daryl Stranger. It was day one of the coroner's inquest into the police shooting death of Chantelle Moore. She was fatally shot by Edmundston, New Brunswick police during a wellness check in June of 2020. Two of the key witnesses today were Moore's boyfriend at the time and her mother. Here's Angel Moore in Fredericton, New Brunswick with more details.
I'm here at the Delta Hotel in Fredericton, New Brunswick, where the coroner's inquest into the death of Chantelle Moore is taking place. Moore, 26 years old, of the Tethalquit First Nation in British Columbia, moved to New Brunswick to be closer to her family. Moore's ex-boyfriend testified by video. On the night of June 4th, 2020, he called police, concerned after Moore's text messages seemed from another person. Martha Martin, Moore's mother, testified an Edmundston police officer came to her house for Moore's address. She understood police were going to check on Moore, concerned another person was in her apartment. Later that night, at 4:19 a.m., police knocked on Martin's door and told her Moore was fatally shot. T.J. Burke, the family's lawyer, hopes the inquest will find answers.
You know, the family feels very, very strongly that there could have been less lethal force used that day.
Burke says he is filing a lawsuit tomorrow on behalf of Moore's family against the officer who shot Moore and the city of Edmundston.
I found that the city of Edmundston was putting more money into lethal force instead of non-lethal force.
Tomorrow, the officer who fatally shot Moore is expected to testify. The inquest is expected to last 4 or 5 days, with Acting Chief Coroner Emily Casey presiding. Angel Moore, APTN National News, Fredericton, New Brunswick.
A trial is underway for a Manitoba man charged in the 2015 death of a Cree woman from northern Alberta. 68-year-old Grant Neesby is charged with second-degree murder of Gloria Gladue. She was last seen in 2015. 3 years later, in June of 2018, RCMP recovered Gladue's remains in rural Manitoba. The trial will run until June 23rd in Peace River, Alberta. The second-degree murder trial of Roger and Anthony Bilodeau began today in Edmonton. The father and son are charged in the deaths of Jacob Sansom and Maurice Cardinal. The two Métis men were shot to death during a confrontation while hunting. APTN's Chris Stewart has more.
According to Jacob Sampson's family, in March of 2020, Jacob Sanson and his uncle Maurice Cardinal were hunting near Glendon, Alberta. They had shot a moose and were familiar with the area. Jacob Sansom and Maurice Cardinal's bodies were found beside their truck on a rural road near the small town of Glendon, Alberta. RCMP say there was a confrontation between the two hunters and Roger Bilodeau. RCMP alleged that Anthony Bilodeau drove up in a third vehicle and shot both men. A jury trial began today in Edmonton. Both men are charged with 2 counts of second-degree murder. Both Anthony and Roger Bilodeau pled not guilty at the start of the trial this morning. After jury instructions, opening statements began in the afternoon, with the Crown beginning its case. The trial is expected to last around 10 days. Maurice Cardinal was 57 years old. Jacob Sansom was 39. Chris Stewart, APTN National News, Edmonton.
We want to hear what you think about some of the stories you've just heard. Here's how to continue the conversation. Send your emails to news@aptn.ca or leave a comment on aptnnews.ca. You can also find us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, and TikTok. Follow APTN News to join the conversation and see our latest stories. The federal government gave an update Monday on some of the investments it's making to support Indigenous communities impacted by residential schools. 3 federal ministers were in Ottawa to talk about the various initiatives, all of which were previously announced in the 2022 budget. Justice Minister David Lametti did say the government is close to naming a special interlocutor on residential schools, and he gave some insight into what the job will do.
The primary goal of this person is to be a go-between between communities, between families, between levels of government, Indigenous and non-Indigenous, and as well, the person is not an investigator. The investigations are the domain of the police and often the RCMP. Prosecution is domain of prosecutors.
The Saskatchewan Legislative Assembly has unanimously adopted a declaration to honor Indigenous women, girls, and Two-Spirited people. The declaration was crafted by the Women's Commission Chiefs of the Federation of Sovereign Indigenous Nations. The Commission says the declaration brings awareness to the need for protections for many in the Indigenous community from disproportionate levels of violence in all forms. Vice Chief Heather Baer says the bipartisan support of the declaration by the NDP and governing Sask Party is a step forward, and says the declaration will assist in the work of decolonizing and helping Indigenous peoples by bringing them back to traditional ways.
You know, bringing them back and revitalizing, you know, those women's ceremonies, those ceremonies that made our tribe strong.
We need to take a short break, but still ahead, 13 Yukon First Nations have landed a groundbreaking partnership with the North's telecommunications giant. Welcome back to APTN National News. One of Nunavut's most important regulatory boards has ruled against the proposed expansion of one of the territory's largest active mines. And now the decision about the Mary River iron ore mine is in the hands of the federal cabinet. Our Kent Driscoll joins us from Iqaluit to explain. Kent, what does this decision mean for the future of the Mary River mine and the Inuit who work there?
Thanks. And this decision by the Nunavut Impact Review Board has taken 4 years. That's the longest decision in the agency's history. The board, known as NERV locally, is responsible for making recommendations to the federal cabinet about whether mining projects in Nunavut are acceptable to Nunavummiut. 4 years ago, the Mary River iron ore mine, owned by the Baffinland Company, put forward a proposal to double their production of iron ore from 6 million to 12 million tons annually, and put in a 100-kilometer railway to allow for easier shipping. They said at the time that if the increase wasn't granted, they would have to put the mine into care and maintenance. That's mining lingo for closing shop. Mary River is very close to both Pond Inlet and Arctic Bay, Nunavut. Some residents there have reported drops in wildlife since the mine opened. They also famously protested last year by blocking off the runway and mining road at the mine site, ceasing production for a week. On the other hand, there are 300 Inuit who work at that mine, and many of the local community councils came out in favor of the project. Early Friday evening, NERB made their recommendation. They don't think the mine should be allowed to proceed. In a letter to Northern Affairs Minister Dan Vandel, the NERB wrote that the proposed expansion has the potential to result in significant adverse ecosystemic effects on marine animals and fish, caribou, and other terrestrial wildlife, along with vegetation and freshwater, and these effects could lead to associated significant adverse socioeconomic effects on Inuit harvesting, culture, land use, and food security in Nunavut. As for the mine, Baffinland is playing it cool for now. In a press release, their CEO wrote, "We at Baffinland are disappointed in the NERB recommendation. Our Phase 2 proposal is based on years of in-depth study and detailed scientific analysis, and has considerable local support based on years of consultation with Inuit and local communities. We will be asking the federal government to consider all of the evidence and input to approve the Phase 2 application with fair and reasonable conditions." So now the decision lies with this man, Northern Affairs Minister Dan Vandel. The feds have 90 days to agree or disagree with the NERB decision. But there is a third way. Now, back in 2016, a western Nunavut gold mine was turned down by the NERB. Instead of agreeing or disagreeing, the feds kicked the decision back to NERB, asking them to find another way. A year later, they did. So, after the longest regulatory process in the territory's history, this may not be the actual end of the Mary River discussion. Kent Driscoll, APTN National News, Iqaluit.
All right, thanks for that, Kent. A stone that has significant meaning to the Blackfoot people in southern Alberta has been named the official gemstone of the province. APTN's Tamara Pimentel takes us to Blackfoot territory to find out what ammonite means to the people there.
All year round, Troy Knowlton scours this area along the St. Mary's River in search of a rare gem that can't be found anywhere else, ammonite.
This is what we have found and what I just dug up. So this is referred to as K-zone. It's a lower quality of ammonite, but it's still beautiful.
Knowlton is Blackfoot from Piikani Nation and the owner of Blackfoot Rocks and Gems, a business that specializes in ammonite.
If I find one that hasn't been broken, I want to be the first to break it.
Down the river is the Corite International Mine, who agreed to allow Knowlton to surface mine in this area. He takes his findings home and prepares the stone for jewelry making. A month ago, ammonite was declared the official gemstone of Alberta because it can only be found here in the southern part of the province, near and on the Blood Reserve. Millions of years ago, this was all a massive sea filled with ammonite creatures. Now its fossils and remnants of its shell remain.
Where it was a very desirable stone and was very valuable, now that there's a direct connection to the province of Alberta, the value has increased because now it's the official gemstone of Alberta.
To be truthful, it's been a little bit disappointing.
Beth and Tracy Daychief own Buffalo Rock Mining, which has been in operation since 2008. Out of 3, it's the only Indigenous-owned ammonite mine, and it's permitted by the Blood Tribe. They say the tribe and their business was left out of the announcement that ammonite would be the official gemstone by the province.
When they made the announcement, it made it sound like Corite was the only ammonite company. Our mine wasn't mentioned in the announcement. Our tribe wasn't included in the announcement.
Tracy Daychief says it's been affecting their business.
Our market is in China. We're on the shopping channel. So when the government made that announcement on paper that they were the only mines, so that caused this guys some of our what's it called? Our sales.
APTN has reached out to the province for a comment. We didn't get a response before airtime. For Knowlton, the announcement gives recognition of Blackfoot territory and the importance of ammonite to the Blackfoot people. Remnants of ammonite called iniscum or buffalo stone are said to bring luck for things like harvesting food and are now part of ceremonies.
The ammonites have been used in the Blackfoot culture and spirituality for over 1,000 years. And the ammonites themselves, smaller ones like this, I've seen depicted in photographs in ceremonies that were catalogued in the early 1900s.
Knowlton's finished product is paired with his wife's silver work and sold at local rock shows, where they share the story of ammonite, Alberta's hidden gem. Tamara Pimentel, APTN National News, Lethbridge.
13 Yukon First Nations have landed a groundbreaking partnership with the North's telecommunications giant. Yukon's fiber-to-home assets are now First Nations owned. And as Sarah Connors tells us, the people behind the deal say the economic benefits are far-reaching.
Having a strong internet connection is important, especially in remote northern communities. Chief Dana Tisha Tram of the Buntut Gwitchin First Nation in Old Crow, Yukon, says it's now more important than ever.
Where we are in modernization, we need internet. So connecting households, we're now giving children and schools access to remote programming, to telehealth.
The infrastructure needed to access the internet can be expensive but profitable. That's why Northern Telecommunications Company Northwestel and Yukon First Nations Telco LP, a collection of 13 First Nations development corporations, have secured a historic partnership.
We're going to own a major piece of infrastructure that impacts every citizen in the Yukon.
Fred Cooey is the spokesperson for the First Nations DevCorps. He says they bought $10 million worth of fiber optic cable infrastructure from Northwestel. That infrastructure delivers high-speed internet to Yukon communities. The First Nations will profit by leasing the infrastructure back to Northwestel over the next 20 years.
All 13 First Nations development corporations will get an equal share of that.
Northwestel will continue to maintain and operate the network. They'll also use the partnership to invest more upfront in Northern network improvements.
I see a lot of unity and coming together in the North and in the Yukon as well. And I really appreciate this time in leadership.
The Vuntut Gwitchin are one of the participating First Nations. Chief Danitija Tram says the partnership will unlock new economic opportunities for years to come.
It's a win-win-win, and I think this is a large signal about a new way that we can do business in Canada and get around many of the old issues that still plague us today around respect of our traditional territories and working with First Nations.
Sarah Connors, APTN National News, Whitehorse.
We have to take one final break, but still ahead, we'll have a recap of the Juno Awards. Stay with us. Welcome back. It's time now for our photo of the day. Our viewer and regular contributor to Photo of the Day, Greg Scriber, sent in this amazing shot of sun setting over Petrie Island in Ottawa, Ontario. Amazing colors in the sky, and the subtle ripples in the water are so calming. Thanks to everyone who submits photos, and if you feel you have a great photo, send that photo by email to share@aptn.ca. Now let's take a look at tomorrow's weather forecast. Starting over in the east, 15 in rain in Halifax and 17 in Fredericton. 4 degrees in Nain and 9 in Happy Valley Goose Bay. 13 in Val-d'Or and 13 in Rouyn-Noranda. 13 in rain in North Bay and 14 in Sault Ste. Marie. 14 in Thunder Bay and 11 in Big Trout Lake. Sunny and 14 in Norway House and sunny and 14 in God's Lake. 13 in Barons River and 18 in Winnipeg. A mix of sun and cloud and 23 in Swift Current and 14 in North Battleford. Rain and 13 in Meadow Lake and rain and 12 in Buffalo Narrows. In the west, 14 in Peace River and 16 in rain and High Level. 12 degrees and cloudy in Edmonton and 13 in rain in Calgary. 13 in Vancouver and 14 in rain in Bella Coola. 10 degrees in Prince Rupert and 8 degrees in Dease Lake. 10 degrees in Whitehorse and -2 in Old Crow. 14 and rain in Trout Lake and 16 in Norman Wells. 1 degree in Fort McPherson and 12 degrees in Colville Lake. 0 degrees and some snow in Cambridge Bay and -1 in Baker Lake. -2 in Resolute and -1 in Arctic Bay. The 21st Annual Juno Awards were held over the weekend. It was the first in-person presentation in 3 years, and also the first time there were 2 categories for Indigenous artists. Here's Annette Francis with a wrap of the awards.
The star-studded event kicked off with a walk down the red carpet at the Budweiser stage in Toronto. Singer-songwriter Fawn Woods took home the Juno Award for Traditional Indigenous Artist of the Year. She says the category acknowledges grassroots music and says the idea for the album came from her dad.
It went back to a saying my father shared with me, and he used to tell me, you know, Fonzie, that was my nickname. He said, you should really learn our language. It brings a whole other beauty and meaning to these songs that you hear and that you sing. And, you know, I realized that our Indigenous language isn't something that we just sing or that we speak. It's a mentality, it's a way of life, and I really wanted to show that through my music.
The Contemporary Indigenous Artist of the Year award went to electronic music artist DJ Shub. He says mixing culture with electronic music is a genre that can teach.
We don't do enough listening to the Indigenous problems we have in this country. And I think what this music does is it creates that space, you know, to have that talk, that communication that we need to have as a nation. And that's what the music does. You know, it's full of culture, you know, it's full of beautiness. And if you just sit down and listen, you'll experience something.
Three-time Juno Award winner Susan Aglukark was this year's recipient of the Humanitarian Award for her long-standing dedication to improve the lives of children and youth in northern Indigenous communities through the Arctic Rose Foundation. She says it's all about the healing journey.
I mean, intergenerational trauma is a real thing, and so we have to figure out how to recover from all this, recover from all of it, and then we can come to that table with a real good starting point for that reconciliation conversation. So I think correcting the narrative is my focus right now. Let us take the time we need to heal, to catch up with that part of the process.
Anna Francis, APTN National News, Toronto.
Indigenous kids from Alberta to New Brunswick took the stage in Toronto. It was a chance to show off their dance moves and build some confidence. APTN News caught up to a group who came all the way from northern Manitoba. Here's that story.
Over 100 Indigenous youth performed at Meridian Hall, one of Canada's largest theatres. For Tegan Mason, it was an opportunity of a lifetime.
It's just so surreal. I never get to experience anything like this. I'm super happy and I'm super excited to be here.
It's all part of Outside Looking In, a program that's been working with Indigenous youth in grades 7 to 12 for the past 15 years.
So what we do is we work with these youth from September all the way till May. And we say to the kids, if you're going to school and if you're getting good grades and if you have good behavior and you have good attendance, we bring you to Toronto in May to perform on Canada's largest stage, and tonight with Snotty Nose Rise Kids and DJ Shub.
For Jax Wood, it's more than just performing.
It's like another program in Outside Looking In. It's also a high school credit. Helps us with what we want to do with post-secondary, what we want to do after high school.
Tracy Smith says that's the intent of the program.
So this is a culminating performance of all their hard work. And for a lot of these kids, just staying in school, making sure they're, staying in the group, they're doing all the work that they need to do, that's a long goal, right? A long-term goal. It's not instant gratification. I think it's a very emotional ride for them, and to get here and perform on this stage is a pretty amazing accomplishment.
Some of these kids have been involved right through high school.
It means everything to me. It made me who I am today, Like seriously, yeah. I gotta do the same because ever since I came, when I was in grade 7, I'm a graduate now. I graduated 2 years ago. Yeah, it changes me.
Smith says that's what the program is all about, celebrating who they are. Anna Francis, APTN National News, Toronto.